Hello, Duke fans. Welcome in to the Duke Blue Devils Insider Podcast, your daily podcast for all things Duke Blue Devils news. Just like every day, we thank you so much for tuning into the show today to get your latest on the Duke Blue Devils. My name is Hugh Strain, your daily host, as well as beat writer at Duke Blue Devils on SI. Happy to chat with you guys today, as well as every single day. The 1-seed Duke Blue Devils survived a big-time scare against the 5-seed St. John's Red Storm in the Sweet 16. Duke advances to its third straight Elite Eight under head coach Jon Scheyer, now looking to get back to its second Final Four in a row. Duke takes down the Red Storm 80-75, but a hard-fought battle from St. John's. Really midway into the second half, it started to genuinely feel like that game became St. John's to lose. With just over 15 minutes to go, St. John's held a 55-45 lead on an 11-1 run, or a 10-1 run, I apologize. And it really started to feel like St. John's was in control of this game and there wasn't much for Duke to do. St. John's matched the physicality of the Blue Devils, really punched Duke in the teeth, I thought, early in the second half. Caden Boozer was very clearly bothered by the active hands of the Red Storm. A couple costly turnovers for the Blue Devils, only 9 on the game for Duke, but some very costly ones early in that second half that gave St. John's a ton of momentum. Overall, I thought Duke played an absolutely fantastic game. It won't show it in some metrics, but I really thought Duke played about as well as it could. I grade it probably an A-. I thought Duke matched the physicality. It controlled the tempo. It got out and ran when it wanted. I thought its defense was fantastic, despite St. John's shooting a pretty high percentage from the floor. I thought there was a lot of things outside of Duke's control, mainly the three-point shooting from St. John's that really changed the game. So St. John's on the season is 197th nationally at KenPom in three-point percentage at 33.5%. It's 290th in terms of percentage of its total points it gets from the three-point line at 27%. And then out of nowhere, really, in the tournament, the three-point line became a really heavy factor for the Johnnies. And it was again last night against Duke, more than it has been really all season long. St. John's went 13 of 32 from the three-point line. That's a 41% clip. Really, Duke was trying to get inside the paint because St. John's is a paint-oriented team like the Blue Devils. Duke was willing to give St. John's that three-point shot, and St. John's made him pay. I thought Duke's game plan was fantastic. I thought it worked really well. It kept St. John's out of the paint, but the high clip of the three-point shot. Again, St. John's hit 13 threes compared to Duke's 5. Duke went 5 of 14 from beyond the arc itself. But I thought the high volume three-point shooting was not what Duke was expecting. And again, played obviously pretty big dividends in that game. Ruben Prey, who had hit 11 three-pointers all season long heading into the Sweet 16, went 4 for 4 from beyond the arc. Dylan Mitchell hit a 3, who had been really, really struggling from the three-point line. Same thing with Dylan Darling. He went 2 of 5 from 3. But nonetheless, Duke got it done, and I really thought Duke played an absolutely fantastic game, really on both sides of the ball. I think really what you can sort of nitpick, if you were going to nitpick something, is the free throws. We talked about it heading into the game. St. John's was a heavy free throw shooting team, but also gave up a pretty decent amount of free throws to its opponents. And Duke dominated the free throw attempts department. But if you were a Duke fan, you were pulling your hair out watching Duke attempt those free throws really down the stretch. Front ends missed. In the second half, Ian Jackson was called for a flagrant one on Pat Gungbo with Duke down a couple of points. Patrick Gungbo missed both free throws, and then Duke did not score on that possession. And I thought that was kind of the point of the game where it really felt like it was St. John's to lose. On the night, Duke shot 15 of 24 at the line, 63% clip compared to St. John's 4 of 8. So obviously dominated St. John's in the attempts department, but the lack of makes, really hurt the Blue Devils kind of in the grand scheme of things. Ended up not mattering. Duke made the winning plays down the stretch. And the catalyst to that win, the title of this podcast, is junior guard Caleb Foster, who I think just put together one of the best performances in recent college basketball memory, not because of the box score, not because of the stat sheet, not because of the highlight plays necessarily, but because of how he did it in that moment. So Caleb Foster had been out since the first half of Duke's regular season finale against North Carolina. That was a win for the Blue Devils, but Caleb Foster fractured his right foot in that first half, came out of the locker room in the second half in a walking boot. It was unclear at that time how serious it was. Duke had already lost Patrick Gungbo to foot soreness as well for an extended period of time. We find out later that it was a fractured right foot that would require surgery. So it seemed more likely than not that not only Caleb Foster would be out for just the ACC tournament, but would probably be out for the rest of the season. He gets that surgery. It's saying, it seems like a long shot that he would come back. Say if Duke made the Final Four, he might come back, but that seemed like the only possibility at the time. And then 20 days go by since that surgery, and we get reports early in the week that Jon Scheyer saying there's a slim chance Caleb Foster plays, but at least myself, I wasn't really taking it seriously. It just would be a miraculous recovery, and I think Jon Scheyer was just trying to keep St. John's on its toes, not necessarily giving away the game plan. And then the day of the game, we get word that Caleb Foster will suit up for the Blue Devils, and absolutely shocking news. 20 days after having foot surgery, he is going to play in the Sweet 16. And not only did he play, but he was the heart, he was the soul, he was the emotion, he was the energy for this Duke team. And that's why it was one of the most impressive performances I think I've ever seen on a college basketball court in that moment. And I think it's fair to say if Duke does not have Caleb Foster on the floor in that game, Duke does not come out on top. Caleb Foster was absolutely fantastic. Plays 19 minutes off the bench, goes for 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists on 5 of 8 shooting from the field. You could tell very early on that Caleb Foster was not himself, especially with his jump shot. He barely grazed iron on his first free throw attempt of the night, airballed the three-pointer. He clearly was a little bit ginger, understandably so, kind of on that foot, handling the basketball. But it got to the second half, and he came out of the locker room late. We were never really told why, but he came out late, probably just retaping or doing whatever to ease the pain on that right foot. But he comes off the bench in the second half and completely transforms this Duke team. Again, St. John's goes on a 10-1 run by itself to take a 55-45 lead with just over 15 minutes ago. Enter Caleb Foster. He goes on a 7-2 scoring run by himself, was clinical attacking the basket, was so aggressive, immediately brought the momentum back to Duke's side. And it's not the stat sheet. It's not even really the scoring. It was the winning plays. It was putting his body on the line when he was already hurt. It was the elite defense, the elite perimeter defense. It was making those winning plays that really propelled Duke to victory. He was the heart and soul of this team. And you can't really stress enough. It's hard to stress on this show just how crucial and just how inspiring that performance was from Caleb Foster. But it got to the point where Jon Scheyer was even getting choked up on the sidelines following the game. He was talking to CBS Sports' Tracy Wolfson just after the victory on the court. And Tracy Wolfson asked Jon Scheyer about that performance, and Jon Scheyer could barely hold back tears. This is what he said on the sidelines, quote, "He had no business playing today. That's one of the most special performances I've ever seen." Scheyer later said in his press conference, quote, "His commitment to Duke, his commitment to me and the program has been unmatched. It was a surreal thing to coach. I really felt like he was going to will us to victory, and that's what he did." Now, keep in mind, Caleb Foster is putting his body on the line with a fractured right foot. This is a season after he fell out of the rotation in one of the most disappointing campaigns of any player in the country last season. Caleb Foster entered his sophomore season as one of the biggest breakout candidates on a national scale. He ended the season barely playing at all. He could have transferred. He could have went to the portal, found a new home, found greener pastures. He stayed with Duke. He put his head down and worked. Now he is a catalyst to bringing Duke to the Elite Eight for the 3rd straight season, as Duke now looks to get to the Final Four for the 2nd season in a row and avenge that historic collapse against Houston in the Final Four. Can't say enough about Caleb Foster's performance and how critical it was to the Blue Devils' success on Friday night against St. John's. Duke will now face 2-seed UConn in the Elite Eight. The UConn Huskies have won 2 national championships in the last 3 seasons. On Sunday at 5:05 p.m. Eastern time, projected tip-off, 1-seed Duke, 2-seed UConn for a spot in the Final Four in Indianapolis. Duke slight favorites in that game to open up. And it's kind of a similar makeup, I think, Duke and UConn to Duke and St. John's. UConn, very physical team. Terrace Reed down low has been an absolute monster really all season long, and they're just so complete with championship DNA. Alex Caravan is averaging over 20 points per game on over 40% shooting from the field in this tournament. Again, Terrace Reed has been fantastic. They're really complete. Will probably be the toughest opponent Duke will face so far, but as we know with the Blue Devils, they can beat anyone in the country. They've beaten Michigan. They have 17 quad one wins. Really no team, if this Duke team is fully healthy, that it can't beat. Not that it's going to be fully healthy, but it's closer to healthy. Have to assume that Caleb Foster will be back on the court, and same with Pat Gungba. that is going to do it for us here today at the Duke Blue Devils Insider Podcast. Just like every day, we thank you so much for tuning into the show today. Make sure to check us out at si.com/college/Duke every single day to get your latest on the Duke Blue Devils. My name is Hugh Strain, your daily host, as well as beat writer at Duke Blue Devils on SI, and I'll see you tomorrow.